You got some dope tracks coming along. You've written and recorded your latest song, the instrumentation is in check and it's nice and full sounding. And then you start tweaking. You tweak with both hands. And before you know it, your song is a train wreck. Your tracks are off track. Keep watching to learn how to avoid this. I got 5 tips that you can apply straight away without buying anything. And at the end, I've saved up a nugget for you that will blow your mind. So stick with me. Okay, let's dive in. Hi, I'm Ole from Subphotic.com, where I help beatmakers, producers, rappers, any makers of hip-hop music to get their music sounding as good as possible and doubling down on their music production. I got a special tailor-made gift for you, which is the ultimate mixing guide for producers. Download it, it's free, the link is in the description. So I got 5 tips to unsuck your mix. Now the first tip is use plugins sparingly. Be a cheapskate when it comes to plugins. I've spent more money on plugins than I would dare tell anyone. Has it helped my productions? Maybe, maybe not. So you're sitting there with your finished recording and you want to mix it, you want to make it sound as good as possible. So what do? Well, you grab plugins here, plugins there, compress the kick, compress the snare, compress everything into oblivion, and then you apply EQ. You want that high-end sheen. Then you just use a high shelf and you boost the EQ and you make it bright. Or maybe you treat each track separately. So you start with the kick, make that sound wonderful, and then you continue with the snares, make that sound wonderful. And when you're done, it's a train wreck. It doesn't sound good. Maybe it even sounds good as you're sitting there, but the next day, it sounds like the mix is sucking. So only use a plugin when you hear that you need to use it in the context of the mix. It takes practice, but you need to listen to the mix as a whole, and then you have to listen for the kick drum, and then you can say, okay, the kick drum has a lot of such and such frequencies. Let's check if I can remove something or add something, and then you use an EQ there. And that doesn't mean that you have to use an EQ on the snare, right? Even though you used an EQ on the kick. So use plugins sparingly. Listen for compression. Listen for dynamics. Are your drums too dynamic? In most cases, yes, they are too dynamic. Do I need to add compression? Not necessarily. Maybe the drums need to be dynamic. Maybe I'll add a clipper instead, or some saturation to tame the peaks a bit. But compression on drums, sometimes definitely, other times no. You hear all these tricks and hacks and shortcuts where you're told to apply such and such compression on the kick and the snare. It's a difference between we who make hip-hop music, we who produce beats. We use sample packs or drum breaks from records. Those are already processed, whilst, for example, pop and rock and other genres, jazz, they have acoustic real live instruments that they have recorded. Of course, they need more compression than an already processed kick from a sample pack. Use compression sparingly, use EQing sparingly, only use it when you need it. So listen to the track and determine what is lacking here, what do I need to add, and what is excessive, what do I need to remove. Those are the 2 questions you need to ask yourself. What do I need to add? What do I need to remove? That's it. And you can use plugins to do that, but before you reach out for a plugin, try the channel faders. And I promise you, doing this, your mix is going to improve by a lot. My second tip is this. Use the right plugin for the job. So I've been guilty of buying a lot of plugins. I've bought, for example, the Shadow Hills mastering compressor from UID. I've bought the ATR 102 mastering tape recorder. I've bought the Soothe 2 from Oak Sound. And I really like those plugins. I love them, but do I need to use them all the time? No. Sometimes it's better for me to use the stock Logic compressor, or a free Klanghelm compressor could do the job better than any of those that I just mentioned. The Blindfold EQ could do a better job sometimes than the Pro Q3. You just need to experiment and find out what fits the bill most. Sometimes I use the Classic Clipper from IKEA Multimedia, and other times I use the Overdrive plugin from Logic. So it really depends. Sometimes I've used the Glue compressor from Ableton Live and found that suits better for my situation than, for example, the SSLG bus compressor from Universal Audio. You have spent a lot of money and you like to have something back for those money spent, but does it serve your mix? And even though you've spent a lot of money on a plugin, doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use it all the time. My third tip is mix at a consistent level. So I've made this mistake myself a lot of times, that I'm cranking up the volume because I love the feel of the boom bap drums, for example. So I crank up the volume. I really want to hear the bass on my speaker system. And in order to hear the bass properly, especially the sub bass, you need to crank it up, right? Because it's not that audible. And it also depends on your room. So you crank it up and then you leave it be up there for a long time. And then you must push it down because your ears won't survive a mix session without lowering the volume a bit from time to time. So my suggestion is this: find a good working volume. For me, the volume is at talking level. While the song is playing, I can also have a conversation going without me being too distracted. And from time to time, of course, boost the song and have a go at it, but be quick to turn it down again. So that's tip number 3. Find a consistent level that you're comfortable with. Of course, you could crank it up way louder than what I just prescribed, but I think that your ears will tear faster, so you might not be able to finish your mix in one sitting. And also, you can take breaks, of course, and many people advise that. Take a 5-minute break from every 30 minutes or so. Recalibrate your ears, they say. I don't know. I feel that I have to practice what I preach, and actually, I don't practice that. I just have to admit it and be honest. And admit that I don't take that many breaks when I'm mixing. I get in the zone and then I'm done. Which actually leads me to tip number 4. Move fast. It's a sprint. It's not a marathon. When I was a beginner at mixing, I would spend easily 16, 18, 20 hours on a mix. And that's too long. In a regular song where the recording is okay and everything is in check, the editing is done, you shouldn't spend more than a couple of hours, maybe 3 or 4 hours on a mix. More than that, you will ruin it. So what do you do? How do you mix that fast? Going from 20 hours on a mix down to 3 to 4 hours. How do you do that? You listen to the mix as a whole, and then you start off by pointing out 1 or 2 or 3 things that you hear must be done. Then you go in and you do that, and you never spend more than 30 seconds to a minute on each thing that you need to fix. So say that I need to do something about the kick. Well, I'll go in straight into the kick track. I find the problem. I try a solution. If that doesn't work, in the back of my mind, it says, be done with it already. And then I'll move along to the next one. And maybe it's the snare. Maybe it's the vocals. I work like that. And I go in straight for the kill. Get rid of that. Add this. Do that. And I don't strive for perfection because I know that in 20 minutes or so, I will come back to that kick and I will adjust it again. I will do as little as possible on each tweak. Tip number 5, check on other systems. I can't underline this enough. When I was a budding mix engineer, I would search the internet for tips on how to make great mixes. So I'll check in on my Apple AirPods. I will check in the car. I will check on my NS10s, and I will check on my headphones. I will check also on my main speakers. I will go back and forth doing that. So when I'm in the mixing session, I have those 3 options: the headphones, the NS10s, and the main speakers, the vocals. You would do fine using only one, and then you could just go check on your AirPods later. If you're a beginner, use a pair of headphones. It doesn't matter what brand or anything, and use some studio monitors if you have them, or some other speakers. Check out this video where I break down the difference between using headphones and studio monitors when mixing. It's actually easier to hear bass on headphones because the speakers are so close to the ears, so you don't need to crank it up that loud to hear the very low end. Whatever is beneath 80 hertz, for example, is much easier on headphones. Check on systems where you listen to music the most, and for many people that's the AirPods or your headphones when you're sitting on the bus or whatever, or in the car where you listen to music. So listen to a system that you are accustomed with, and there you will hear what's lacking in your mix, and then you can come back to the mix and address those issues. When I came to an understanding of this way to work, I would sit in my car and I would use my notes app, and I would jot down ideas of what to improve my mix on, what to do next with my mix, and then I would go back to the studio and I would do exactly that and nothing else. And then I would go back to the car and check, and then back and forth and so. Just a word of encouragement. This is a way to actually learn your studio monitors, because you go back and forth a couple of mixes, maybe 5-10 mixes, you go back and forth from your car to your studio, from your AirPods to your studio, and then you will actually learn how the studio monitors work, what their strengths and weaknesses are. And after some mixes, you will intuitively understand, how would this sound in my car? How would it sound on my AirPods? And I think I'm at that level now that I don't need my car anymore. I don't need my AirPods to check my mixes. It's enough with my NS10s and my main system, and maybe by time the NS10s will be sufficient. If you can use any of these things that I've said as a music producer and apply it in your day-to-day work, I would be thankful if you like the video and subscribe to my channel. I've got more in stock. It's right around the corner. Other great videos like these where I break down some tips on mixing, mastering, production, and also don't forget to download my ultimate mixing guide for producers. The link is in the description. And my bonus tip is this: use your ears. That's a cliche. Many cliches are cliches because they've been repeated over and over again, and they have stood the test of time. When I was a beginner, whenever I heard or read somebody say, just use your ears, man, I would be discouraged. I would be put off because, yeah, I'm using my ears. I'm born with them. I know how to use them. It's kind of rude implying that I don't know how to use my ears, but actually it's another way of using your ears. It's like a sprinter. That's because this whole video is like a sprint. I've been running through it. My gosh, I gotta improve. So in order to win the race, everyone can run. When you were 3 years old, you would run around, but you wouldn't run like a sprinter. There are a lot of things that you can do to improve your running. We all listen, but how do you actually listen for frequencies? How do you listen for distortion, saturation? Can you hear the reverb? Can you hear the delay? And in this video right here, I break down 5 tips on how to improve your listening skills so that it's easier to make good mixing decisions, mastering decisions, and if you outsource your mixing, you can also be a better judge on the quality of the work. Check that video out, and I'll see you there. Peace!